My name is Daniel Harper, and I never thought I'd end up as the guy spilling his soul onto the page like some heartbroken poet grasping for meaning. Maybe this is my way of finding closure after the wreckage of my life, or maybe it's a warning etched in ink for someone else treading the same treacherous path. Hell, maybe it's just me screaming into the abyss, hoping the echo will drown out the pain that still lingers like a stubborn shadow. But here I am, a year after my world imploded, putting it all down, every jagged piece of it, because silence isn't an option anymore. It all started in February 2018, after 3.5 years of what I genuinely believed was a damn good marriage. A union I'd built my entire existence around, brick by fragile brick. I was 29 then, a technical sales director for a mid-sized firm that sent me on the road every so often. Short trips, 3 or 4 days every 5 weeks, nothing that ever felt like it disrupted the rhythm of our lives. I'd roll back into our sprawling apartment in downtown Portland, Oregon, a place we'd turned into a sanctuary with hardwood floors and tall windows that caught the gray Pacific Northwest light just right. When I wasn't traveling, I'd work from home, my laptop humming on the kitchen counter while the city buzzed below. My wife, ex-wife now, Lydia Bennett, was 31, a force of nature at a high-end marketing firm, pulling in a salary that made my respectable paycheck look like loose change rattling in a jar. We met 5 years earlier at a barbecue hosted by a mutual friend, a sweaty summer evening where the air smelled of charcoal and possibility. Sparks flew over greasy burgers and lukewarm cans of beer, her laughter cutting through the chatter like a melody I couldn't shake. She was breathtaking, blonde hair cascading in loose waves, hazel eyes that shimmered with a mix of mischief and steel, a presence that commanded every inch of that backyard. I was rougher around the edges, a little scruffy with my unshaven jaw and faded jeans, but she said she liked that about me, said it balanced her polish, her razor-sharp wit, her effortless grace. Within weeks, we were inseparable, tumbling into each other's lives with a reckless abandon that left clothes strewn across floors whenever we crashed at her cramped studio or my cluttered bachelor pad. 18 months later, we stood in a small chapel, exchanging vows under the soft glow of candlelight, then moved into that apartment with dreams of a house, a family, a future painted in bold, hopeful strokes. Life felt golden, like we'd cracked some secret code to happiness, until it didn't. The cracks didn't appear overnight. They crept in slow and insidious, like damp seeping into a foundation you don't notice until the walls start to buckle. It was after 3 years that I first felt the shift, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Lydia's hours at the firm stretched longer, her days bleeding into nights filled with team dinners and client drinks that she'd recount with vague, breezy excuses. I'd be on the road, holed up in some sterile hotel room in Seattle or Boise, the hum of the air conditioner drowning out the silence as I dialed her number. Her voice would come through distracted, clipped, like she was half listening while juggling a dozen other things she never quite explained. "Busy day, Dan?" she'd say, or "just wrapping up with the team." Her tone sharp enough to slice through any follow-up questions. When I was home, she'd pick fights over the smallest slights. Me leaving a sock on the living room floor, forgetting to unload the dishwasher, letting the recycling pile up by the door. They were petty jabs, but they piled up like stones, each one heavier than the last. I'd mention her late nights, the way she'd stumble in past midnight smelling faintly of wine and cigarette smoke she swore came from colleagues, and she'd bite back with a ferocity that caught me off guard. "It's part of the job if I want to make VP, Dan. You're gone too. Don't play the martyr with me," she'd snap, her hazel eyes flashing with something I couldn't quite name. Defiance, maybe, or guilt masquerading as anger. She wasn't wrong about my travel, though it was hardly the same. I cut back anyway, trimming my trips to the bare minimum, thinking it might stitch us back together. Didn't. Our sex life, once a wildfire that burned through every spare moment, turned to ash. I'd reach for her in the dim glow of our bedroom, my hands tracing the familiar curve of her waist, and she'd pull away, muttering about exhaustion or deadlines. "Not tonight, Dan. I'm wiped," she'd say, rolling over to face the wall, leaving me staring at the ceiling, my pride bruised and my desire left to fester. I blamed her job, convinced myself the stress of her climb was draining her dry, turning her into the shadow of the woman I'd married. It hurt, rejection after rejection carving deeper into my confidence. But I didn't suspect a damn thing. No shady texts lighting up her phone, no lipstick stains on her collars. She kept her work mobile locked tighter than a vault, and I wasn't the type to go digging through her drawers or cracking passwords. She'd retreat to our spare bedroom, her so-called office. The door half closed as she tapped away at her laptop until the early hours, the blue glow seeping under the frame like a silent accusation. By September 2017, she was gone 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. Work events, she claimed, her voice casual as if it were nothing. I'm not the jealous type by nature, but I knew she turned heads wherever she went. Blonde, fit, quick-witted, with a smile that could disarm a room. She worked with more male CEOs than women, and I figured she had to fend off a few wandering hands or lingering stares. She swore it was all business, nothing more, her tone firm and unwavering. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. What a goddamn idiot I was. The first real hint that something was rotten came a month before it all blew apart, what I've since dubbed D-Day, a term that feels too small for the way it shattered me. It was a cold January night in 2018, the kind where the Portland drizzle clung to everything, turning the streets into a slick, reflective mess. Lydia had texted me earlier, saying she'd swing by the supermarket after work to grab a few things. Milk, bread, the usual staples we'd been running low on. I offered to meet her in the parking lot to help with the bags, a small gesture that felt like a lifeline in the growing distance between us. She pulled up in her silver Audi, the engine purring as she popped the trunk, her blonde hair damp from the rain and sticking to her cheeks. I leaned into the back seat to grab a sack, my hands brushing the leather, when something pink caught my eye, glinting faintly under the passenger seat in the dim glow of the overhead light. I bent down, my breath catching as I fished it out. A lacy bra, delicate and unmistakable. One of hers from that boutique she loved, the kind she'd splurge on because she said it made her feel powerful. My stomach dropped like I'd been sucker punched, a cold sweat prickling across my skin. She had this thing, a quirk I'd once found irresistible. When she was in the mood, she'd slip her bra off first, tugging it out from under her shirt with a flirty grin that promised everything I'd ever wanted. It was our little ritual, a spark that had fueled countless nights tangled in each other's arms. So why the hell was it under the seat of her car, crumpled like some forgotten relic? My heart slammed against my ribs, a sick heat crawling up my neck, threatening to choke me. I stuffed the bra back under the seat, my fingers trembling, and hauled the groceries inside, avoiding her eyes as she trailed behind me. "You okay, Dan? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her voice light but edged with something. Curiosity, maybe, or a flicker of unease. "Fine," I muttered, shoving the panic down deep, burying it under a pile of excuses I wasn't ready to unravel. I couldn't confront her. Not yet, not without more than a gut feeling and a piece of lace burning a hole in my mind. My head spun as I unpacked the bags, milk sloshing in my shaky grip, her presence behind me a weight I couldn't shake. That night, I lay awake in our bed, her soft breathing beside me a cruel mockery of the intimacy we'd lost. I replayed every late night, every flimsy excuse, every time she'd brushed me off, wondering what I'd let slide, what I'd been too blind or too trusting to see. The next day, I woke up with a resolve I hadn't felt in months, a quiet determination to find the truth, even if it tore me apart. There was no solid proof beyond that damn bra, just a sinking dread that gnawed at my insides like a hungry beast. I worked downtown, a 20-minute drive from her gleaming office tower, and Portland was big enough to swallow secrets whole, to let them fester in its rainy corners. I decided to test her, to give her a chance to prove me wrong, to quiet the storm raging in my chest. That Friday, I pulled out all the stops, pouring myself into a gesture I hoped might bridge the chasm between us. I cooked her favorite chicken Alfredo with garlic bread, the kitchen filling with the warm scent of cream and herbs. I set the table with candles flickering in their holders, our nice plates gleaming under the soft light, a bouquet of daisies, her favorite flower, spilling out of a vase I dug out from the back of a cupboard. I even splurged on a bottle of Pinot Noir, its deep red promising a night of reconnection. When she breezed in at 6:30, her heels clicking against the hardwood, I pointed to the setup with a grin that felt more fragile than I'd admit. Surprise, LYD. Thought we'd have a night in. Just us. Her face fell, a shadow passing over her features before that fake apologetic smile I'd grown to despise slid into place. Oh, Dan, I'm so sorry. I've got drinks with the team. Big pitch tomorrow, last-minute prep. I'll eat quick with you, but I need to shower and run. My gut twisted, anger bubbling up like molten lead, searing through the hope I'd stupidly clung to. I didn't blow up, kept it together, my voice steady even as my inside screamed for release. While she showered, the sound of water hissing through the pipes, I slipped my work phone, a cheap burner I used for travel, into the back seat of her Audi, wedging it under the seat where that bra had been. I'd track it with my personal cell, a desperate move born of a desperation I couldn't name. She emerged from the bathroom looking like $1,000,000, black dress hugging her curves, heels sharp enough to puncture my resolve, hair swept up in a sleek twist that made her look untouchable. Let's eat fast, she said, her tone brisk as she sat down, barely glancing at the spread. Nah, I said, my voice dead flat, the words heavy as stones. Go have fun with your friends. She frowned, her fork pausing midair. You mad? Just sad you're never here? I fired back, the truth slipping out before I could stop it. She rolled her eyes, a dismissive huff escaping her lips. Don't be dramatic, Dan, she said, then grabbed her purse and stormed out, the door slamming shut like a gunshot. I pulled up the tracker 20 minutes later, my hands trembling as I watched the dots settle on my phone screen. Her car had stopped at a bar she'd mentioned before, a trendy joint downtown with overpriced cocktails and a clientele that screamed money and ambition. I drove over, parking across the street in a shadowed spot, feeling like a stalker but needing the truth more than I needed my dignity. The rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and heavy, the neon sign of the bar flickering in the distance. An hour dragged by, each minute a slow torture as I sat there, my breath fogging the windshield, my mind spinning through 1,000 what-ifs. Then she stepped out, her blonde hair catching the light as she emerged from the bar's glass doors. Not alone. A guy was with her, tall and broad-shouldered, his slick suit screaming executive, his confident stride marking him as someone from her world, her firm, no question about it. He pulled her in close, his hand sliding to the small of her back, and kissed her full on the lips. A deep, hungry kiss that left no room for misinterpretation. My chest went numb, a hollow ache spreading through me as my hands clenched the steering wheel, knuckles whitening under the strain. They climbed into his car, a sleek black BMW that screamed money, and drove off, their taillights disappearing into the night. I followed, tailing them at a distance, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. 10 minutes later, they pulled into the lot of a boutique hotel, all modern glass and soft lighting, the kind of place that catered to discreet rendezvous. I watched them stumble out, hand in hand, her laugh floating through the air as they disappeared inside, the door swinging shut behind them. That was it, proof in living, breathing color, undeniable and devastating. I pounded the steering wheel with my fists, tears burning my eyes, a raw mix of rage and shame choking me until I could barely breathe. I didn't charge in, didn't kick down the door and demand answers. Something broke inside me, or maybe it just died, a quiet, final death. I drove, no plan, no destination, just away, the city lights blurring into streaks as I pushed the pedal harder, until I landed at a dive bar 30 miles out of town, a rundown shack on the edge of nowhere. The tavern was dim and grimy, the air thick with the stench of stale beer and pine from the worn wooden walls. I ordered a whiskey, the glass cold against my palm as I slumped at the bar, the weight of the night pressing down on me like a physical force. The bartender, a woman with gray streaks threading through her dark hair and a face etched with years of hard-earned wisdom, clocked my misery the second I sat down. Rough night, huh? You look like someone ran over your dog and backed up to do it again, she said, her voice dry but not unkind. I smirked, a half-dead twitch of my lips. Something like that. A guy slid onto the stool next to me. Mid-40s, flannel shirt hanging loose over broad shoulders. Hands rough and calloused from work I couldn't guess at. "Name's Jake," he said. His voice gravelly but warm, carrying a hint of the country drawl you don't hear much in Portland. I didn't want to talk, didn't want company, but he had this easy way about him, like he'd weathered storms worse than mine and come out the other side still standing. We got to chatting, small talk at first. Weather, the Blazers' latest game, until the whiskey loosened my tongue and it all poured out. Lydia, the affair, the hotel, the way I'd watched my life unravel in real time. "Man, that's brutal," Jake said, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder, his grip firm but steadying. "Happened to me years back. Wife ran off with some slick bastard from her office. Here's the deal. It's your move now. You can sink into this shit, let it drown you, or you can swim. You're not alone in this mess, brother." His words hit like a lifeline, rough and unpolished but pulling me out of the fog that had swallowed me whole. We swapped names, Daniel and Jake, and he grinned, a crooked smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "You need a reset, buddy. I've got a trailer on my land, 26-footer, decent shape. Needs some TLC, new paint, maybe a few fixes, but it's yours cheap if you want it. Park it on my ranch. Keep an eye on the place for me. Get your head straight, away from all this city noise." The bartender leaned in, wiping down the counter with a rag that had seen better days. "Hell, honey, I'd have jumped at that to ditch my ex years ago. Took me a decade to claw my way out of that hole." It sounded crazy, a lifeline tossed from a stranger in a bar, but it clicked. Escape, freedom, a chance to breathe without her shadow suffocating me. I got home that night long after midnight, the apartment dark and silent except for the faint hum of the fridge. Lydia was in the spare room. The door cracked open, her silhouette hunched over her laptop in the blue glow. "Where've you been?" she asked, her tone sharp, cutting through the stillness like a blade. "Out," I said, turning the question back on her. "You? Drinks with the team, you know that," she replied, her voice clipped, dismissive. I stared her down, my eyes boring into hers, searching for a crack in the facade. "You cheating?" The words slipped out, raw and unfiltered, hanging heavy in the air. She blinked, caught off guard, then laughed. A brittle, hollow sound that didn't reach her eyes. "What? No. Who's feeding you that crap?" "Someone," I said, keeping it vague, testing her. She called me drunk, paranoid, her words dripping with scorn as she flounced off to bed, the door slamming behind her. I crashed on the couch, her kiss with that bastard replaying in my head, a knife twisting deeper with every loop. But Jake's offer glowed like a beacon through the haze, a faint promise of something better. The next morning, we barely spoke, the tension thick as we moved around each other like strangers sharing a space that no longer felt like home. The weekend rolled on in a blur of silence and avoidance, her tapping away in her office, me staring out the window at the gray city skyline, plotting my next move. I met Jake a few days later at his ranch, an hour outside Portland, a sprawling stretch of land where the air smelled of earth and pine instead of exhaust and regret. The trailer was solid 26 feet of weathered metal and faded paint, cozy inside with a small kitchen, a worn couch, and a bed tucked in the back. It was parked near a hill, surrounded by trails that wound through towering trees, the kind of place where you could hear yourself think. I handed him $2,000 in cash, a steal for a fresh start, and he promised to haul it to a quiet spot on his property, a clearing with a cabin overlooking the foothills, power and water already hooked up. For weeks, I pushed Lydia to come clean, dropping hints, asking questions, watching her squirm under the weight of my suspicion. She gaslit me with every breath, denials sharp as glass, deflections that turned every conversation into a maze with no exit, even snapping at me for overreacting when I pressed too hard. "You're imagining things, Dan. Get over yourself," she'd hiss, her eyes cold, daring me to prove it. I had no photos, no hard proof beyond what I'd seen with my own eyes, but it didn't matter. The pain was evidence enough, a wound that refused to heal. I stopped talking, stopped fighting, and started planning in the quiet spaces she left behind. While she was at work, I moved my stuff, Clothes folded into duffel bags, my laptop and work gear packed into boxes, odds and ends I couldn't bear to leave behind. Bit by bit to the trailer, each trip a step toward freedom. She got nicer, weirdly, like she sensed the shift, her tones softening, her smiles tentative. But it was too little, too late, a hollow echo of the woman I'd loved. One night, she had another team outing. Her purse slung over her shoulder as she breezed toward the door. I packed a bag too, my movements deliberate, my resolve stealing. "Where you going?" she asked, eyeing me with a flicker of unease. "Friends. Shop talk. You'd hate it?" I said, throwing her old excuses back in her face. My voice steady despite the storm inside. She huffed, a flash of irritation crossing her features, but let it go, the door clicking shut behind her. I didn't come back that night. Drove straight to Jake's, crashed on his couch, and spent the evening at the bar with his crew, rough around the edges guys who laughed loud and drank hard. Their camaraderie a balm to my battered soul. I felt human again, like I could breathe without the weight of her lies crushing me. Lydia texted the next week about a work trip with her execs. Her messages casual, oblivious to the unraveling thread between us. "Have fun with your boyfriend?" I replied, smirking as I hit send, the bitterness sharp on my tongue. She blew up, called me, yelling through the line, her denials frantic but hollow. "You're insane, Dan. There's no one else. Stop this." I hung up, done caring, done listening. While she was gone, I cleared out for good. Took my essentials, leaving the furniture, the shared relics of our life, behind like ghosts I didn't need haunting me. On the kitchen table, I left my wedding ring, its dull gleam a final farewell, and a note scrawled in black ink. "Hope he was worth it." I walked out, the door locking behind me with a soft click, and felt 28 pounds lighter, the burden of her betrayal sloughing off my shoulders like dead skin. The trailer became my haven, parked in that clearing on Jake's land, the foothills stretching out before me, the air crisp and clean, washing away the grime of the city and her lies. She bombarded my phone when she got back, calls lighting up the screen, texts piling up in a desperate flood. "Where are you?" "Dan, answer me." I ghosted her, letting each message fall into the void, unanswered, unread. Her mom tried too, her voice soft and pleading on a voicemail I deleted without a second thought. After a week of silence, she cracked, her tone shifting from anger to something softer, more broken. "I'm sorry, Dan. It got out of hand. It was a mistake, I swear. I ended it. I need you to talk to me." Too little, too late. Her words hollow against the memory of that kiss, that hotel door swinging shut. Her pleas turned nasty as the days dragged on. "You're a coward, Dan. Come home. Face me." But I swapped my number, cut the cord, severing every tie she could use to reel me back. Divorce papers landed in my inbox in June 2018. A cold, clinical end to what we'd had. She begged me to talk, her emails a mix of regret and manipulation, but gave up when I agreed to an uncontested split, signing away the last legal thread between us. By fall, I was free, living in the trailer full-time, running trails that wound through the hills, my lungs burning with clean mountain air. The solitude was a gift, a chance to rebuild piece by piece, to find myself beneath the wreckage she'd left behind. I met a girl, Sarah, on one of those runs. 27, spunky, with dark curls and a laugh that reminded me joy wasn't lost forever. She'd spotted me struggling with a flat tire on my truck, her hands quick and sure as she helped me patch it up, and we clicked over coffee afterward. She calls me her hill guy, teasing me about my scruffy beard and the way I've embraced this simpler life. And though we're taking it slow, she's a spark I didn't expect, a light piercing the shadows Lydia left. A year later, March 2019, I'm in town at my usual coffee shop, a cozy spot with mismatched chairs and free Wi-Fi, working on my laptop, the hum of conversation a soft backdrop. A voice cuts through the noise, "Daniel," sharp and familiar, freezing me mid-keystroke. I look up, and there she is, Lydia, waving frantically as she crosses the street, her blonde hair bouncing in a ponytail, her frame thinner, worn, but still striking in shorts and a tank top that show off her tanned legs. "I've been looking for you," she says, breathless as she reaches me. Her hazel eyes wide with something I can't read. Hope, desperation, maybe both. "Can we talk?" I hesitate, the old wounds flaring, but nod, leading her to a bench outside where the air feels less suffocating. She gushes at first, a nervous stream of words, loves my beard, my tan, the way I've changed, then dives into the heart of it, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Dan. The affair, it wrecked me. Karma hit hard. I lost my job when the firm found out. Too much drama. He got transferred after I told his fiancée the truth. Blew up his life too. I was a mess after you left. Ended it right away. I couldn't live with myself. I want you back." I laugh, a bitter, jagged sound that makes her flinch. "You think I'd forget? I saw you with him, Lydia, at that hotel, kissing him, walking in together. You killed us, everything we had, every promise we made. You don't get to waltz back in and erase that." She sobs, tears streaking her face as she clings to my arm, her fingers digging in like she's afraid I'll vanish. "I love you, Dan. I always have. Let me prove it, please. I'll do anything." I pull away, her touch burning like a brand I don't want anymore. "You don't get to undo this. We're done. Dead and buried the second you chose him." She begs, dinner, a fresh start, her voice cracking with every plea. But I cut her off, handing her an email address scribbled on a napkin, not my number, and send her off, her footsteps fading as she walks away, shoulders slumped. She emails later that week, pleading for a weekend, promising to fix it all, but I shut it down with a single line: "I'm happy alone. Good luck." She's moving states soon, chasing a new job, still clinging to the delusional hope I'd follow, that I'd uproot my peace for her wreckage. I won't. I've got my hills, my trails, my life. A quiet, hard-won sanctuary she can't touch. She can keep her regrets. They're hers to carry now, not mine.